and thank you for joining us this evening for Deconstruct 2021, Raising Your Voice. My name is Sophie and I'm thrilled to introduce this session run by EcoActive. This year, our conference theme looks at raising your voice, discovering how our voices can be amplified or suppressed and how we can create a platform for our voices to be heard through a range of different opinions. Before we get going, just a quick announcement. You are able to ask questions to the speakers via the Q&A function. So not the chat function, but do use the Q&A function. You're also able to tick the anonymous box if you don't wish to have your name attached to the question. And we do also ask that you don't provide any personal information.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth from Goldsmiths. I work alongside Sophie. Apologies that she's just dropped off there. Must have just been a Wi-Fi issue. Oh, she's back. So thank you very much for joining the session. As Sophie was saying, if you move your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see the Q&A box pop up. So if you type your questions there, you can choose to post anonymously and we will take questions verbally. So Andrew and Catia from EcoActive will pick up those questions as we go along. We are recording this session at the request of Andrew and Catia. So just to let you know that that's happening, and without further ado, I'll hand over to them for us to hear more about what EcoActive do and issues around the environment and raising your voice to do with the environment and sustainability. So Andrew and Catia, many thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Sophie. Hi, everyone. So yeah, just sort of leading on from that, thank you again for everybody's time. Really appreciate sort of the session, and hopefully you guys are going to get something out of it. Just to introduce myself again, I'm Andrew Halfpenny. I'm on the board of trustees at EcoActive, and I'm obviously joined by Catia, who is the program manager at EcoActive, and we're going to spend the next sort of 45 minutes talking through some sort of specifics that Catia is going to sort of raise with us around raising your voice, and specifically around the sort of arena that is sort of sustainability. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully everybody is going to be able to see that, but then we can I suppose get straight into it. So hi Catia.
Hello. Hi everybody. It's great to be here.
So I think maybe the first thing to do for the audience is maybe if you could give a little bit of background, sort of on yourself, growing up, where you were born, and specifically how you got into the role at EcoActive.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's fantastic to be speaking here. I really hope any young person who's listening can take some inspiration from this talk. I grew up in a small village in the middle of a national park in central Italy, and then I studied with a curriculum focused on social sciences and philosophy. Then I went on studying philosophy in university. I achieved a bachelor and a master degree, and I studied in different countries in Europe. And eventually, when I graduated, I moved to London, and I started working in different roles through the education and the environmental sectors. And eventually, after a few years, I became EcoActive program manager and educator. So I manage projects, but I also teach and deliver them there.
Great. And then more specifically, when it comes to sort of EcoActive as a charity, I obviously, sort of know quite a bit about it, but it'd be great to sort of bring to life what their, sort of mission is really. If you can sort of just sort of talk through that. And I think just in terms of everybody listening, it would be great, if we could ask you guys to, use like we said, use the Q&A and just give us a word or a sentence in terms of how you're feeling about the climate emergency, not without thinking about it too much. I know it's obviously in the media, in the news quite a lot, but what's your what's your thoughts? What's your feelings around that? Because we can maybe sort of pick that up a little bit later in the session. So yeah, use the technology, and yeah, if we can sort of get you just to give yeah, a one-word answer or a couple of words, you know, in terms of how you're feeling about climate emergency, that would be great. But yeah, Catia, back to my original question, if you're able to sort of introduce EcoActive and what their mission is.
Yes, so while you guys maybe tell us how you feel about this issue, because our job is exactly about that, to understand how you feel and help you. EcoActive is an environmental education charity. We're based in North London in Hackney, and our mission is to save the world from ecological collapse. So to say, we try to do it through teaching sustainability. We run projects in school, different schools in the whole London. And we also run community gardening projects, forest school, outdoor education. So different ways to try empower young people to gain awareness and knowledge, but especially to take action and to feel empowered to do something about global problems. So yeah, that's a little bit of us.
Great. And then, you know, what inspired you specifically to raise your voice and become a change agent and an activist?
Yeah, so I always thought I wanted to become somebody who would leave a trace in the world, no, and make it better. I didn't want to be invisible or live as if I didn't matter. So as a teenager, I explored politics, and I understood that I didn't want to become a politician. But still, the idea of being an active citizen, of being participating in society was very strong. It's always been strong. I took it from my family, and then obviously studying philosophy strengthened that. I understood quickly that anytime we keep silent in front of something that is not okay, we are indirectly contributing to keeping the status quo. And I didn't want to be that somebody who just did nothing and turned their head away. Because, you know, ultimately, I really cared about a lot of things. I cared about equality, about justice, and they were very strong issues inside. My high school was in a bigger city, and this allowed me to start taking part in demonstrations and youth actions and projects. And in doing this, I felt as if I was an active character in the narratives that I was living. It was a way to try to have a voice in what was happening. And it was a time where, you know, my country back then was the beginning of an endless economic crisis, which just worsens year by year. But it was when the government started cutting fundings, especially in the education system. So we had a lot to be angry about and a lot to raise our voice against and for. And in this way, I wasn't just passively getting on with what others decided for me and for us, but I was trying to be on the active side of the narrative. And I think this is exactly what we try to do in the environmental sector. If you're active in the environmental sector, you decide to be in the active side of the narrative, and you try to help with these decisions which are often too poor.
Cool. And so, how does EcoActive as a charity, as an organisation, how do they help young people specifically raise their voice?
Yeah, so before I dive into that, should we look at the chat to see if we had any answer? Because
yeah. So we've got a couple. We've got three actually, all along a similar sort of thread. So anxious, nervous, helpless. They're the sort of three headline ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, similar theme.
Okay, and yeah, that's exactly what I expected. And so we are there for you guys. So this is exactly what we try to help with at EcoActive. All of this is okay. It's okay that we feel like that, but it's also healthy. But it needs to be addressed. No, these emotions that we feel can serve us to do something. We can transform anger, fear, anxiety, and frustration into action, into power and solutions. And the way we try to do that at EcoActive is by giving students voice in different ways through the different projects that we have. We have a very experiential, hands-on and practical approach, and we keep plenty of space to explore solutions that already exist, and also to vision positive futures, to imagine how a positive future could be, and then to hear ideas from the students and help them implementing them. For example, one of the projects, if you can scroll to the next slide, Andrew.
Yeah.
Next one, the one project we are starting just now. Next slide, please. Yeah, this one. This is the Green Influencer project. We will involve students between 10 and 14 years old. And after a couple of workshops where we will learn about climate science, sustainability, so a bit of a content, we will then spend the rest of the workshops working on students' ideas, on things that they care about, project ideas that they would like to implement in their own local community. And then we will just help them implementing them, making it happen. So it's one of the ways how we try to facilitate that process. Another way is forest school. For example, we run forest school programs, and so forest school is a learning approach which is very child-led. And that means that we let children decide what they want to do, and we adjust the delivery to their needs and to their choices and their pace. So in a way, we are giving them the chance to raise the voice, because we announce their self-esteem, their confidence, their self-awareness, and also the freedom to choose and speak up for themselves. So more or less, and this slide is a bit of a way to, these images as a way to show that what we try to do is being facilitators and mentors, and trying to give space and voice to the students we work with, to find the right tools, strategies and tricks to make things happen. So it's like, I feel like sometimes we try to launch a seed in there, and then we help them water the plant, but they grow the plant. Or put it differently, we hold their hands until they can work on their own. But really the idea is that the biggest gift we can give them as educators nowadays, I think, is empowering them and making them feel that there is hope. Because there is, and there is a lot of good stuff out there happening already. You just need to join the wave, and everything is possible if we can imagine it, and we are there to help you.
Exactly, yeah. And what does it mean, for you and your work to raise our voice?
So on a general raising the voice, I think, is what made possible that all major revolutionary changes happen in history in a positive sense. Think of human rights, the end of wars, fighting racism, women's rights, gender equality, you name it. Of course, we're still working on most of this stuff, but anything changes only if there is a force counteracting and challenging the status quo. And I think the status quo should never remain stagnant, because if it does, then usually it means that power is fossilizing somewhere, and that is never good. How do we challenge the status quo? By speaking up, by raising our voice. By not complying, by questioning, thinking critically and differently, and embracing diversity, And that's why we should raise our voice when something is not okay, because if nobody does it, because we tend to think bystander effect, someone will say something. If everybody thinks that, then nothing will happen. So it's not a call to violence, because this can happen peacefully without increasing the level of violence, which is already high in our world. And we always stand for kindness and care. But it's a call to questioning, assessing where we are. And if we are not happy with it, do something. Let's be proactive. Let's imagine better solutions, and then move. Do something concrete without delegating, without waiting for someone else to solve it. And we believe at EcoActive that young people are amazing at this, because they're fresh, they're creative, they can still think out of the box, because they're not twisted in social norms yet, which just sometimes they don't make much sense, no? So we want to give them that space, because I really trust young people and all the incredible creativity that they have. And yeah, I learned so much from my children at forest school, for example. So, and also it's important, and I want to stress this, we never mean to make young people feel that they're responsible for solving this crisis, not at all. Never feel responsible for that, and you are absolutely not alone. We are so many people already taking action and doing so many different things. And it's okay to feel powerless and hopeless, because at the beginning, when I approached the topic, I felt the same. My teacher in university was, he was already 75 years old 10 years ago, and he would just, close these lectures on sustainability saying, it's too late anyway, we will never change, there's nothing to do. And of course he was already old, right? He didn't care. But for me, I would just go home feeling so depressed. But then instead I approached a different approach to the topic, and I'm surrounded by people who do so much, and I just feel so empowered and motivated every time. So just join this wave and not the depressed, hopeless narratives that we tend to hear around.
Yeah, sounds good. And I think when you sort of talk about being, proactive, what could, myself, everybody listening, what could we all do practically to help with your mission?
Yeah, so this is the answer to this question could be really, really long, because we can do so many things in our daily routine to help. But I think there are two ways to raise your voice, if you want. When it comes to living sustainably, we can raise our voice literally, going on the streets, demonstrating, demanding political action. But we can also do it through taking action every day. We don't need to shout on the street. We can also change habits, choose better options every day. And this is another way to be active and to raise your voice, even if you're not shouting. It's like, any drop in the ocean helps, because the ocean is made of drops. It's when we are many, many people living in a better way, more sustainable, that we will see change happen. But to make it simple, because it's a quite complex issue to districate, and it's a very systemic topic. System thinking is part of understanding sustainability, but we can't do it in this session. It's a bit too long to understand. But I like to break the sustainability journey in 5 dimensions usually, which are relatable to our everyday life. And so if we look at the slide, starting clockwise from 12, it's consumption, nutrition, diet, energy use, transport, and activism, political participation. So in this way, we can break down a huge systemic complex topic into small achievable steps that we can relate to every day. And it's a simplification, of course, but it helps, I think, to cover the basic. So if we start, for example, if you go to the next slide, so all of these dimensions of life, so what we eat, how much energy we use, how we move, all of this make up what we call the carbon footprint. And this is a concept I think everybody should know. It's quite basic. So the carbon footprint is a measure which tells us what's our impact on the planet. So it's a quantitative measure, a number that is the sum of our choices, our routines in terms of resources and carbon emissions, that tells us how much we are impacting on the planet. And you can see that our footprint, at least in the Western world, is really big. It's too big. So we need to work towards making it smaller. So how do we do that? By changing habits every day, making more environmentally friendly choices. For example, let's look at it from a practical point of view. If you move on to the next slide, let's start again from the top clockwise, consumption habits. So what can we do to be more sustainable when it comes to consuming? So we are a consumerist society, so we consume a lot and waste. What can we do? Can we consume less and consume wise? So the 6 R's of sustainability are a helpful top tips, so to say. It's a very simple, basic top tips, but it helps if we're starting to to understand the issue. So 6 R's is 6 words that start with R, and there are different models of the 6 R's, and the words sometimes change, but the concepts are similar. So let's start from the first one on top, rethink. Rethink means, can we think differently about how we go into everyday choices? Can we, for example, not buy something? Can we think of a different way to live that is less impactful? Can we repurpose an item instead of buying a new one? Can we rethink ourselves? Can we rethink the way how we produce things if we're manufacturing that? And so on. So this is a way to dive into a mindset of sustainability. I, for example, had to rethink my lifestyle some years ago when I moved to London, because in London, I was used to, I don't know, eat vegetables from my garden because we have space, whereas in London, I don't. So I had to join local schemes of buying vegetables from local farmers and so on. So rethink. And then refuse, which is linked to reduce, means, can we refuse to buy stuff? We have too much stuff. Our basic needs are always covered, and most of our needs are induced by marketing and advertising. So before we buy something, can we ask ourselves, do I really need that? Because 80% of the times we don't. So we will minimize the amount of resources that we need to produce new stuff. We will reduce the amount of waste that we produce, because waste is one of the major problems we have nowadays. And it's really crucial that we stop thinking in terms of living zero waste, as if we don't produce any waste at all in the first place, because recycling is not really a solution. In fact, it's the last R in the wheel. Also, if we decide to buy something, can we buy secondhand or reuse it or share it? And if we want to buy new, then here you have the power of your role as a consumer, because you can choose to support ethical businesses rather than irresponsible businesses. You can check this by informing yourself using labels that help you, like fair trade, organic, and so on. And you can, in this way, make a choice. And this is ultimately one of the biggest powers we have as consumers, deciding where to put our money and what to invest on. That's a big thing, because in this way we can influence the demand. And slowly, if we all demand for more sustainable products, all companies will have to move towards a better way of producing things. So yeah, as I said, reuse, repair, similarly give longer life to things, reuse things, repair them like our grandparents used to do. And the last thing we can do is recycling, because really we recycle such a tiny percentage of waste globally that it's not really a solution. And when we can't recycle, or we recycle so little, we're still remaining in the logic of linear economy, which is an economy where we have a problem at the beginning where we extract resources, and a problem at the end where we throw products away. And the planet can't stand this anymore. We need to think in circular terms, where we don't produce waste, we transform, like circular economy principles, and in this way we can be sustainable. So just quickly moving to the other dimension on, it's 2 o'clock, it's time to eat, so nutrition and diet. This is also a big step we can take. Addressing our nutrition and embrace a plant-based diet is a very strong it has a very strong impact, because unfortunately nowadays we destine most of the land to cultivating crops which feed animals that are killed to give us meat, because in the Western world we eat so much meat every day, and there are people starving still, and of course this distribution of resources is in balance, and we can't keep going like this. So reducing the amount of animal products is definitely a thing. Not everybody has to be vegetarian or vegan, but we need to reduce the amount of meat we consume. And then also being aware of your supply of your food, because the food system has to change, because the current one isn't working. So we can choose to buy local, seasonal, organic support the local economy and direct distribution. Go and buy vegetables from your farmer nearby, because really we don't want products that come from the opposite side of the world, traveling so many miles, and maybe they're produced by people who are not even paid fairly, who don't even live in good conditions. So let's try to rethink the food system as well. Third thing, energy. So what can we do to lower our footprint in terms of energy consumption? Daily choices, daily really routines, such as saving energy by, it can be any small thing, switching off your devices overnight, maybe you don't do it, or filling in the kettle just as much as you need and not completely. Any small thing that can help saving energy is good. And if you have access to decision making, say you can influence your energy provider, then switch to a renewable energy provider, because as well, this is a very strong action you can take, because it means that you're not supporting the fossil fuel industry, and your energy will not come from oil and gas or coal, but will come from renewable energy. So that's very important. Transport, again, actions we can take every day. Say no to cars or any mean that releases carbon dioxide in the air. Choose to walk, to ride a bicycle, to share cars possibly. Share transport, carpooling, car sharing is already better than one car per person. We will have electric and hydrogen cars in the future, and it will be the combination of all these solutions that will make our transport system a lot more sustainable. So we can already achieve certain things every day by choosing to walk or cycle somewhere instead of taking our car. So you can all do that. Finally, raise your voices is a section of life which, you know, everybody can approach differently. It's about being politically active, and you can raise your voice in different ways. Some people like to go on the street and demonstrate, and that's great. They demand legislation, political action through that. You can also write to your MP, you can sign petitions. But I would say if you vote, and if not, when you will have the right to vote, that is the strong action you can take. Voting for politicians or parties that have a strong program to tackle climate change, because, you know, ultimately we are citizens, and our biggest right is in voting who is representing us. We are lucky to live in a democracy. We can do that. So let's try to choose people who deserve to be there. So yeah, so that's a bit of a very quick overview. I hope it's been useful.
Yeah, no, good, definitely. And I think, you know, collectively, what do you think are the biggest challenges that we all face, you know, in your opinion, when trying to live more sustainably, and how would we, again, collectively be able to overcome them?
This is a good question, because I think everybody feels sometimes, or maybe all the time, that this is too big to do something about. We will never solve this crisis. It's too big, and then we feel disempowered, hopeless, and then maybe we deny it, or we put this problem aside. We hide it behind, I hope that someone else will solve it, or we don't see that. But no, I would say it's not like that. There is a lot to do, yes, and we are far from being close to doing enough to stay within the targets. But from a practical point of view, there is no obstacle that doesn't allow us to live sustainably. We can all actually be part of the solution. It's just very important to try and look at this problem not from the big perspective of huge, intricate, overwhelming problem, unsolvable. Because, you know, if I look at it from that perspective, of course I can't deal with it. It's too much for me. But once we know what the problem is, let's try to step back be grounded, and go back to your routine and think in terms of small achievable steps, we say in Power School, no? Things in small scale. What can I do in my routine with the people around me to help with that? And if we go back to this small scale dimension, it is a lot better. And every time you do a small thing, no matter how small it is, reward yourself with that, because that gives you motivation to do the next thing. And when everybody does that, when we will all be doing that, and we will be in the right direction. So it's important to approach the problem in the right way. Now, to do all of this, I think, there are three main problems. If you go onto the next slide, I put them into an order. So the first problem, I think, is knowledge. This has been strongly denounced by the climate movement in recent years. You know, One Extinction Rebellion or Fridays for Future, Greta Thunberg, and so on. They were shouting, tell the truth, no? They were demanding governments and media to inform citizens about what's going on. Because if we don't know what's going on, how are we meant to make better choices? And knowledge is a problem. It's still missing, even though things have improved since then. But it's still, not enough. The other problem is that it's a very complex issue. It's not easy to understand. And I don't expect everybody to be interested or be an expert in climate change and sustainability. However, we need certain concepts to be widely acknowledged in order to facilitate that behavior change that we need. And in a way, even though not everybody will need to understand everything about climate change, some concepts and tools are needed so that everybody can differentiate between the choices that are making and make a better choice. So this is the problem. It's something some movements are fighting for, to have sustainability and climate change more widely diffused in the curriculum, for example, because it's still not enough taught in school, and it should instead be embedded cross-curricular subject in all subjects, but also should be a practice. It should be something that we practice in school regularly. Second problem, legislation, commitment and accountability at global level. Now, this is a big problem. We have meetings every year, we have agreements, but they're not legally binding. And so nobody can really do anything if governments are not respecting them. How do we go about that? What do we do? Of course, I can't change that as an individual, but I can raise my voice. I can demand more accountability through the tools that we mentioned earlier. Third thing is changing culture, changing behavior. Now, behavior change is very slow, especially in large populations after decades of consolidated culture, consumerist culture. It's really hard, and we know it happens very slowly. However, I always like to remind myself that, like, my grandparents lived a very sustainable lifestyle, and it wasn't long ago. It was just less than a century ago. So my grandparents grew up in the first half of the last century. They were farmers, they're still farmers. They grew their own food. They didn't eat much meat, only occasionally. Their attitude towards the environment was an attitude of care, of balanced exchange, of giving and taking. They wouldn't take too much. They would, I don't know, I always felt like they have a spiritual relationship of respect and gratitude towards nature. And we can learn this. These are practices that we can revive. And so we can just use this knowledge. And so anyone who's listening, if you have your grandparents who can witness this, go speak to them, ask them how their life was, ask them stories and then learn from them, because they are an incredibly important source of knowledge and sustainability, I think. So change happens very slowly. We need to be patient, but we need everybody on board, basically. So when people start making a change, then someone else will see it and do the same. And slowly, when more and more people will embrace this new habit, it will be normalized, and then we will see a wave of change happening, and it will just become the new normal.
Right. And then I think this is going to be possibly my last question before we open it out to everybody. But what, from your, from your view, is the most significant action that you've taken to raise your voice?
So I think I try to take significant actions every day, because sustainability is not just a job for me. It's my professional life and my personal life is not separate. And if I teach and talk about sustainability, then I'm going to be the first one to practice it. But if I have to choose maybe something very impactful from my point of view that I did, was probably taking part into climate marches in London and demonstrations. This is not for everybody, because not everybody recognizes themselves in going onto the street and demonstrate. But for me, these events are really powerful. It's one way to raise my voice that it has a strong impact on me, because I feel being there is like being part of something bigger than me, and seeing the union and compassion that so many people have for the same cause makes me feel very emotional, very touched. I feel united to everybody, and I feel like I am in the right side of history, but I'm not alone. And it's a bit of a declaration that I choose love, care, kindness over destruction of life. And in doing this, I'm together with other people. So for me, that's a really powerful and empowering event. From a social point of view, these events are also important because they bring attention to a cause that was otherwise ignored. It's a bit like we had an elephant in the room and nobody was looking at it. So these events made it possible that we put a light on it, and we asked governments, come on, look, there's an elephant here, don't you see it? Can we please do something about it? So these events were really important. The climate movement, I'm very grateful to everything that has happened in the past few years, because I'm pretty sure that we wouldn't be here talking about raising our voice for the climate emergency if these movements didn't happen.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the other thing, just from listening to what you've said, and it's something that I got told, well, this week actually somebody mentioned it to me, where we have we've got two ears and one mouth, and we should therefore listen twice as much as we speak, which I know is a little bit against the whole raising your voice, but I think as part of that whole cycle, it's really important to listen and understand, and then obviously feel empowered to then to then sort of take action. So yeah, that's my sort of throwaway comment. But I think obviously mindful of time, and so it would be great to get some feedback and some sort of questions from the audience. Did people want to use the Q&A chat function to sort of throw some questions out to Catia, which we can obviously sort of field and respond to? I think the other thing as well, just from listening to what Catia is saying, is we obviously all need to sort of make changes where we can. And I know that, from my perspective, I'm definitely looking to sort of change my diet to a lot more of a plant-based one, and cycle where I can. So one question, Catia, if you would recommend 3 simple actions, what would they be?
So reduce the amount of waste that you produce, and this can be very simple. It can be when you go shopping, buy loose things, or join local schemes, which don't have to go through the big distribution. So the way you shop makes a difference. It can be very simple, like you reject the plastic bag in shopping. Going plastic free is also, at the moment, is quite impactful, because we are on the trend to reduce plastic, and so it's quite relevant to avoid disposable and single-use objects. So I said 2, I think. Another simple action, reducing the energy that you use at home. That's probably, for some people, it's something that I don't think about. I don't know if that's relevant, but having your temperature lower by 1 degree or 2 degrees, that can already save a lot of energy. You might wear another jumper rather than having higher temperature. That saves as well. And again, as I said, diet, go for plant-based diet, reduce the amount of meat, and try to choose sustainable products. So check how things are produced and try to choose better when you go shopping.
Great, thank you for that. And then a couple more. So more specifically around EcoActive, how did you find out about EcoActive as a charity? And obviously, how did that sort of then sort of feed through to you working there?
Yeah, well, I had to dig a lot around when I moved to London, because I was new to everything, really, moving from another country. And I started emailing every organization that seemed to be involved in the environmental sector. And I started volunteering there. I found that they were teaching about these issues, and I really liked their approach. So I emailed them and I started volunteering. That was back in 2015. So yeah, just look around. There is so much out there. Just write, because people are very happy to take you on board in whatever skill you can share, and email them. It's networking works in London.
Cool. And I think that answers the next question in terms of what's the best way into environmental climate change careers. And I suppose it is just a bit of on the job volunteering, learning, and sort of building that sort of network, or at least sort of experience when it comes to sort of volunteering. Okay. And then next question, what changes can the audience ask their school to make a positive impact?
Ooh, yeah, well, that's going to be really hard to answer in a minute. So many things. Our projects in the past started from very small things. When we entered a school, maybe they didn't have recycling bins, so we put recycling bins. Maybe they made a garden, they started composting their food waste. There are many things that the school can do to improve the situation. It's endless, really. But I would be really happy to give more advice on this. You can also email us, and yeah, we can talk a bit more about that. But yeah, schools have a big power to do better, I think.
Education, definitely. And then what's your favorite thing about working at EcoActive?
My team, definitely. My team is incredibly supportive, which is really important, because I don't think you could do a job like that without having support from your team. But also, as I said, I really always liked the very experiential approach that we have towards teaching this. I really believe that you learn sustainability if you practice it. So I can't just talk about this. We need to practice it. And how do we do it? By making change happen when we deliver projects. That's what I love about it. It's not just theory talking. It's actually seeing in practice what we can change.
Definitely. And then, this question specifically may have been covered, but just to sort of ask it again, but what's the largest change you've made in your own life to benefit sustainable living? And did it feel like a large transition? Very
good question. I made many changes throughout the years. I definitely changed my diet. I now produce my own cleaning products, for example. I cycle everywhere. I do a lot of all the different things that we mentioned in the 5 dimensions, and it wasn't a large change, no. Maybe because it happened progressively, and I also really enjoyed the change, because I felt like, I feel like I'm still improving every day. When nobody is ever perfect in living sustainably, it's impossible, but you can improve step by step and learn new things every day. So it doesn't have to be a sudden big change that you feel overwhelmed by. You can do it slowly, and you can look around yourself what other people do, and maybe do it step by step.
Yeah, gradual. And then I'm really mindful of time, but last question. Do you think animal rights and welfare have a strong relationship with environmental protection?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And that comes back to diet and nutrition. And I mean, regardless of your position, for example, I have a flexible position on nutrition because in London, I'm vegetarian, for example, but I'm not fully vegetarian when I come back home because there is a strong link with my traditions, my identity. My region is almost impossible to be vegetarian and so on. But for example, I like to thank whatever meat product I eat when I eat it. And it doesn't compensate for the fact that I'm still eating meat, but I feel like I'm respecting it in a way. So absolutely, animal rights, welfare is super important. Intensive farming should not exist, and so on. So yes, definitely.
Great. And there's no more open questions. So thank you again, Catia, and thank you everybody for listening. Hopefully people have found it really beneficial and sort of at least take a few nuggets away when it comes to ideas moving forward. Did you want to say anything, closing words, Catia?
I wanted to say thank you so much for listening. I really hope we inspired you. We are there for you. Do get in touch if you want to. And I wish you the best luck into your sustainability journey.
Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for that talk. It was really fascinating. And one of the students has really summed that up by saying that they found it really inspiring, but also really hopeful. So thank you for sharing your insights and your thoughts on this particular topic area. And to our students, thank you so much for joining us this evening. If you are interested in attending our keynote session, this will be taking place in 15 minutes time. This is the keynote session for Deconstruct 2021. And you can book a place if you haven't already by going back to your booking page and adding on the additional session. But for now, just thanks again to Andrew and Catia, and we'll draw this session to an end. So thank you all very much.